Okay, today we're going to talk about how to conduct a RevOps audit, a revenue operations audit. Very often, when we engage with a company, we will require an audit. At RevOps HQ, our company, unless a company already has a pre-existing RevOps organization within their company that can give us historic data and documentation to show that they've been conducting audits, then we will require that audit. Because unless we can get a baseline for whether your company and your organization has the correct practices, principles, technologies in place to conduct revenue operations in a responsible way, then we cannot do meaningful work in terms of optimization and goal setting and things like that. So for us, we came up with a model that we feel covers the baselines of are you meeting the bare minimum of what a responsible revenue operations organization should be doing within a company, right? And this model is called the depth model, the DEPTH model. And if your company is checking all 5 of those boxes sufficiently, then we can talk about doing meaningful optimization work and growth work. And until that time, most of the work that you do in revenue operations should go to checking off those boxes. So today we're going to get into what that model is, how we work with companies, and if you're a RevOps leader in an organization, or if you just have a company and you want to integrate RevOps into what you do, then the very first thing you should do is an audit. And this kind of prepackaged or prefabricated model that we came up with that we apply to every client will help you. So revenue operations, a RevOps audit, what is it, right? Because we know what an audit is from like an IRS context. You might even have an audit from like a CRM context, but what is a RevOps audit? A RevOps audit is a systematic evaluation of a company's RevOps organization, their specific revenue generating function. So that's going to be the data, the processes, technology, the metrics, the people alignment, with an objective of identifying bottlenecks that impede predictable growth. Okay, so again, a RevOps audit, it's that systematic evaluation of an organization's revenue generating functions. Systematic evaluation of an organization's revenue generating functions, right? And again, the objective of that is to identify those bottlenecks that impede predictable growth. So despite widespread adoption of RevOps in B2B and SaaS environments, many companies lack a structured framework to assess the health of that revenue engine on a regular basis. And the absence of such an audit can lead to data fragmentation, misaligned goals, underutilized technology, and ultimately revenue leakage, and which is what we're trying to prevent. And so what this model that we're going to go through today, the depth model, is a 5-step kind of mnemonic designed to guide RevOps practitioners through a comprehensive audit. Each letter in depth, DEPTH, corresponds to one critical dimension of RevOps. So D is data health, because that's the foundation of everything, is your data integrity. E is execution and handoff processes. P is platforms and integrations. T is tracking and metrics. And H is human alignment. So again, DEPTH, that's data execution, platforms, tracking, and human alignment. And by following depth, organizations can systematically uncover some of these root causes of inefficiency. They can prioritize corrective actions, and they can establish a continuous improvement cycle through the conduction of these audits. So let's do it like a little brief overview of what the depth model is. The depth model for RevOps audit really serves as both a conceptual lens as well as an operational checklist. And it's deliberately broad enough to apply to small and large scale RevOps teams. Yet we're going to go into enough detail to really drive specific recommendations. So you should be able to apply what we say here today to your organization at a very granular level. So you can do kind of your own informal audit or a formal audit. So in brief, you've got D, which is data health. That focuses on the completeness, the accuracy, the consistency of CRM and marketing data. And then you've got E, which is execution and handoff process. This examines how leads and opportunities flow through marketing, sales, and customer success, with an emphasis on a defined handoff criteria and service level agreements, right? SLAs. And we'll get into that in a little bit more in a second. Key is platforms and integrations, and this investigates really the technology stack. So CRMs, marketing automation, data warehouses, analytics tools, and the interconnections all of those aspects of platforms and integrations. And then T, we're getting into tracking and metrics. So tracking and metrics really assesses that's where you get into KPIs, which is obviously a big part of how you measure whether you're winning or losing in RevOps, right? So tracking and metrics assesses the KPIs, the dashboards, the reporting cadence, and the more analytical methods that you use to measure progress. And then H is human alignment, and this evaluates organizational roles, accountability structures, cross-functional communication, and shared objectives among human beings, which is kind of a scary component to RevOps, because you can have data health, execution and handoff processes, platforms and integrations, all your trackings and metrics, right? You can have all of these things in place, which is, if you have DEPT in place, you basically have all of your theory and implementations in place. But if you're missing H, none of that matters, right? You have to have the human alignment element is what makes all of the rest of our audit real. So that's why we include that human element. There is an audit of human performance in a RevOps audit. Otherwise, you're not really contributing to a meaningful audit of a revenue function in the company. And so together, these 5 dimensions create this kind of multifaceted audit framework, and they ensure that an organization not only collects high quality data, but also leverages it effectively through these well-documented processes. And they also leverage it effectively through robust technology and through rigorous measurement and through aligned teams of real people. So let's go in depth into how exactly we audit each of these aspects of a RevOps organization through the depth model. So step 1, we get in, and the very first thing we do is we lay a foundation and we look at data health. This is D. What's the rationale for looking at data health? It might seem obvious, but we have kind of a unique rationale. So accurate and complete data is the foundation of any RevOps initiative, obviously. But if records in your customer relationship management system, in your CRM, are fragmented or duplicated or stale, every subsequent analysis, every other thing we might audit, every forecast, every decision is compromised. Poor data hygiene can originate from multiple sources. It can be manual entry errors, which we would try to address through automation. It would be inconsistent lifecycle stage definitions, which we try to address through a revised solution design and implementation, and neglected database maintenance, flawed integration logic, right? There's lots of ways you can have lots of causes or etiologies of poor data hygiene. And so we go in and we review not only whether your data is clean, but why your hygiene may not be up to par. And then we try to identify and isolate those causes, and then create a solution and implement that solution to resolve them. So what are the key activities of our audit when we are auditing data health? So first, we do a duplicate and incomplete record identification. So we do a duplicate check, right? We use CRM tools like HubSpot's duplicate management or Salesforce duplicate jobs, that kind of thing. Or maybe we'll use, sometimes if it's really messy, like an external deduplication script to detect records that share identical email addresses, phone numbers, company domains, things like that. And then we do a mandatory fields audit. So we identify records that are missing essential properties like lifecycle stage, company size, deal amount, and we flag all those records where required fields are blank. And then the second part of evaluating data health is the stage definitions review. So we document each lifecycle stage on a lead, for example, or a contact, for example. We might have subscriber to lead, to MQL, to SQL, to opportunity, to customer, to evangelist, and confirm that the stage transitions follow a consistent rule set. Oftentimes we find in organizations there actually is no rule set. It is highly informal. Next thing we'll do in the audit of lifecycle stage consistency is look at stage transition analysis. So we'll generate a report showing the distribution of records across stages and measure conversion rates between consecutive stages. So we look for abnormally low conversion percentages. For example, if there's an abnormally low conversion percentage from MQL to SQL, there's a big drop off there exceeding 30%. That we're going to flag that, include that as a major bullet point in our audit report. Third in data hygiene is property standardization. So a lot of times we've got properties that are just open text fields or unformatted number fields, and we don't totally know what they should mean. They're very difficult to report on. They're very difficult to use, and so we want to normalize data by standardizing property value options. So, for example, we'll have a pick list assignment, right? So for fields like industry or region or deal stage, we have to ensure that these pick list values are standardized, like North America versus NA or closed one versus one, right? We also want custom property validation. So we'll review any custom properties used for segmentation or for reporting and confirm that each custom field has a clear definition and is actively utilized in workflows or dashboards. Very often there's, portals with 80% of their custom properties aren't used anywhere, or they're only used in legacy data, and they have no visibility into that. Which leads us into our next point, historical data integrity. So with historical data, we want to backfill and clean up, which means we want to identify any records created before a defined cutoff, like 2020, that may lack new mandatory properties, and determine if those historical records require manual backfill or can just be archived. And then we want to have a data ownership assignment, which means that we want to ensure every record has an assigned owner, whether that's a sales rep, marketing manager, a customer success manager, right? This enables accountability for data hygiene, right? So we don't just have, oh, hey, your data is not clean and your admin should take care of it. It's like, no, this person on this team owns these record types, and they need to be responsible for keeping them clean. It's not actually RevOps's job to maintain the data hygiene of these records, because RevOps isn't the team doing the customer success or the sales or the marketing, right? RevOps is the team enabling and normalizing and kind of enforcing the processes that allow these other teams to be orchestrated according to an executive design. So what are the deliverables of a data hygiene audit? So we'll have a dashboard or a report listing number of duplicates flagged and status of deduplication. So is it complete? Is it in progress? Is it 75%? That could be a gauge, right? Then we have percentage of records with missing critical properties. Then we have conversion rate anomalies between lifecycle stages. And then we might have on top of that dashboard, we might have a prioritized action list for data cleanup, noting which data steward or which owner, or sometimes which team, will remediate each issue within a set timeline. So that's depth. That's D of depth, right? So remember, we're conducting an audit, and D is for data hygiene. And so once we've conducted that data hygiene according to those processes and have created those deliverables, then we'll move into step 2 of our depth RevOps analysis, which is E. So DE, execution and handoff processes. So what's the rationale for auditing execution and handoff processes? So it's important for data hygiene to be audited, and we can't do much without having done that. But once we do that, even when the data is clean, inefficient or undocumented processes can cause friction between marketing and sales and customer success. Data hygiene doesn't actually get you anywhere. It's just a necessary prerequisite for doing anything meaningful. So if you have undefined handoff criteria, that often results in leads being dropped or stuck in limbo, which is very difficult. This is one of the harder parts of RevOps, is helping sales teams to understand how your system captures those leads or those opportunities that are kind of in between stages or don't fit clear criteria. So without clear responsibilities and service level agreements, SLAs, teams simply cannot measure or optimize the velocity of opportunities through the funnel. So what are our key audit activities for E, for execution and handoff in the depth audit analysis? So the first thing we do, our first audit activity when we're auditing execution and handoff, is we do a document end-to-end funnel flow. So this is where we create our process map first. we create a visual map. Maybe it's a BPMN or a UML or an ERD, something we prefer Miro, but we're platform agnostic. We'll use Lucidchart, we'll use Excalibur, we'll use whatever. But the first thing we do in our audit of execution handoff is we do this document, and we document the end-to-end funnel flow. We create a visual map of the entire revenue funnel from first web visit to post-sale handoff. And we identify each stage, each decision point, and each actor. So is this the SDR? Is this the account executive? Is this the CSM? Right? And then we conduct a workflow inventory. So we list all automated workflows or sequences. For example, any lead scoring, any email nurturing, any sales cadences that trigger at each stage, and we confirm that they align with the documented funnel map. Then we do handoff criteria and SLAs. This is the next step in our key audit activities of execution. So first, we really define that MQL to SQL handoff. That is a core primitive of RevOps. And we define that. We review the explicit criteria, like a form fill or a lead score threshold or a geographic fit, and that's used to mark a marketing qualified lead. And then we validate that these criteria are actually documented in a shared playbook. Then we move on to SLA measurements. So for each departmental handoff, like for example, from marketing to sales or sales to customer success, we establish a target SLA. For example, sales must follow up on an SQL within 24 hours of qualification. CSM must schedule onboarding within 48 hours of a customer signature, right? So we establish that target SLA, and then we gather data on actual versus target SLA adherence. And that just gives us a baseline. And then the third thing we do, so in our key audit activities for execution, we document the end-to-end funnel flow with a flow chart. We define the handoff criteria and SLAs for each stage, and then we move on to manual versus automated handovers. So what we do first is we conduct a manual touchpoint identification. So we highlight any steps that require manual intervention, like a copying data from one system to another or manually assigning tasks in a project management tool. And then we conduct what's called opportunity stagnation points. So we query the CRM for any deals or any leads that have remained in a given stage for longer than a target time frame. So, for example, no activity on leads older than 7 days, right? That represents a friction point. And then fourth, we move on to ownership and escalation paths. So when we're auditing ownership and escalation paths, we look first of all for role clarity. So for each stage in the funnel, we confirm that exactly one role is accountable, whether, so that's an SDR owns outbound prospecting until the SQL handoff, right? That kind of thing, that avoids situations where ownership is ambiguous or ownership is shared in some unclear way. And then also within ownership and escalation paths, we move from role clarity onto escalation protocols. So if a lead or if an opportunity is deemed truly stuck or truly at risk, then we have to document who must be notified. So is that the sales manager, the RevOps lead? Somebody has to be notified. And then within what time frame? What's your SLA for that? So what are the deliverables for the execution audit handoff? So first, the deliverable that we mentioned is the process map that we're creating. That process map illustrating every funnel stage, every decision node, every owner, every handoff criteria, that has to be created visually. That is an artifact of this aspect of the audit, the depth audit. So we create the process map. The next is a spreadsheet tracking SLA performance by handoff. So for example, what's the average time to follow up on an SQL? What's the average time to onboard a new customer? This is given in a spreadsheet form. And this makes teams very uncomfortable, but provides great opportunities for coaching and improvement. And then finally, we have a list of manual handoff steps flagged for potential automation. So in that process diagram, we'll say here, here, and here, and here, people are doing manual work, and these can be automated with the tools that you have, or you need to automate them with these tools. You don't have this tool, it costs $200 a month, but in labor hours, you're expending $2,000 a month just to do these things manually. So it's worth the investment. So in our depth audit, right, we've got D for data hygiene, E for execution and handoff. Now P, we move on to platforms and integrations. So what's the rationale for auditing platforms and integrations? is this even a revenue thing? You know, the RevOps team, you might say, the RevOps team is not the tech team. They're not software developers, even though many of them are. But modern RevOps really relies on an interconnected technology stack. And RevOps professionals, they understand from a process perspective, from a mental model perspective, the role each technology has to play. And so RevOps professionals, really at their best, are solutions architects, and they may not be doing low level solutions, right? They may not be designing a specific solution on AWS, although sometimes they very well may, but they are designing the entire interconnected tool stack that the company uses from a revenue perspective. So CRMs, marketing automation platform, data warehouse, business intelligence tools, things like that. You know, do you use Tableau? Do you use Looker? Do you use Power BI? Do you use HubSpot reporting? Do you use a mixture of all of them, right? What do you use? Do you build something bespoke? And so these misconfigurations in a single tool, or a broken integration between two tools, or redundant applications, these can all lead to like data silos, conflicting reports, wasted budgets, and a comprehensive audit of that tech stack ensures that every tool is properly configured, that data flows reliably, and that each system serves a clear purpose. That's why you have a lot of RevOps professionals who are kind of associated with or affiliated with like a core CRM, because a common trope is that a company will achieve enlightenment and realize that they have subscription to 25 different tools and they need to modernize, move to the cloud, and move to a centralized CRM. Maybe keep some of those other tools. Many successful companies have between, I think data shows, between 5 and 7 active integrations with their core CRM. So it's not like you're only using your CRM tool, but that is often the moment that companies become RevOps aware, is they say, oh, we need to move on onto that CRM. It is two not necessarily coupled, but very commonly simultaneous motions that we will introduce go-to-market. We will elevate our go-to-market consciousness, and we will move into a modernized CRM that facilitates our doing this in our own idiosyncratic way. So what are our key audit activities during the platform and integrations aspect of our depth audit? So first thing we do with our platforms and integrations audit is we do a technology inventory. So we do stack documentation. We compile a list of all revenue related tools. We categorize them by function. Is this a CRM? Is this marketing automation? Is this sales engagement? Is this a data warehouse? Is this business intelligence, right? Then we tabulate the ownership and the budget for each tool. So for each tool, we'll note which department owns it and what's the annual spend, and what's the contract renewal date. And then once we have that list of technologies they're using, we'll do an integration health check. So we'll draw an integration map. So we'll draw a diagram of data flows between systems. So for example, if a lead is captured in marketing automation, and then it's pushed to a CRM via API, and then that's synced to a data warehouse every hour, and then that data warehouse is reported in a BI dashboard. We want to visually see that. And then we will rate the sync reliability of those integrations. So for each integration, we're going to check failure logs and error notifications and confirm that syncs run without interruption. So for example, we might review the last 30 days of a sync for success or failure notifications, right? And see what kind of data leakage might be happening. And then the third thing we'll do in our platform audit is we will do a redundancy and overlap analysis. So this is very often the moment we're moving into CRM territory, right? And saying, okay, do we buy this external third-party tool, or do we just purchase the native CRM supported tool, right? So what we'll do is we'll identify feature overlap. We'll identify tools with overlapping functionality, right? We've got 2 marketing automation systems, or CRM features versus sales engagement tool features, right? Do we want to use HubSpot's Breeze Intelligence, or do we want to use Apollo? And then we determine whether consolidation is possible or not. And it is very dependent on the specific business or specific company, whether it is or is not. It very often comes down to feature parity rather than pricing. So very often companies will use tools due to the features that they have versus how much it actually costs to use those or access those features. And then we'll identify unutilized licenses. So we will review our license utilization reports and we'll flag seats, for example, that have not been actively used in the past 60 days. And then, very importantly, and not from an MSP perspective, but we will do a security and compliance review just to see if we can find anything. So user access controls. Do you have 10 super admins for no reason? We ensure that these roles and permissions are properly configured. So for example, only senior SDRs can delete leads, right? Only sales managers can modify custom properties, right? And then we also do a data privacy audit. So we verify that all tools comply with relevant regulations. Or, you have GDPR set up, but are you actually using it, right? When somebody presses accept cookies on your website, does that actually register something, right? Like, does that button actually do something in your CRM so that you're actually being compliant? CCPA compliance we'll review. And then we make sure that opt-out preferences propagate properly across your tech stack, right? It's one thing to opt out of those preferences, but do they still exist somewhere else in your MailChimp database, even though they've opted out in HubSpot, right? So what are the deliverables of this platform audit aspect of our depth audit? So first, a deliverable of our platform audit is a consolidated tech stack inventory spreadsheet listing each tool, listing its owner, the owner of that tool, the cost of that tool, and the primary function of that tool. And then based on that list, we generate an integration health report that summarizes the status of each of those tools and their interconnectedness and any API connections, including error rates and uptime percentages. And then finally, we will include our recommendations for either deprecating or consolidating redundant systems, along with impact assessments of each tool, as well as the impact of deprecation or consolidation. And now DEPT, we're moving on to tracking and metrics. That's the next thing that we focus on in our audit. It's the next domain that we scrutinize in our audit is tracking and metrics. So what's the rationale for auditing your tracking and auditing your metrics? So key performance indicators, KPIs, serve as the scoreboard for RevOps. So without reliable metrics, RevOps leaders cannot determine whether process improvements or technology investments actually yield ROI. So common pitfalls include an inconsistent dashboard definitions, outdated reporting cadences, and reliance on vanity metrics that do not actually align with strategic objectives. So what are our key audit activities during this phase? So during our tracking and metrics audits, we do, first of all, a KPI alignment workshop. So we do strategic goals identification. We will collaborate with executive leadership to clarify top level objective, right? What's our top level objective? Increase ARR by 30%, reduce sales cycle length by 15 days, right? And then we do metric selection. So for each strategic goal, like increasing ARR or reducing sales cycle length, we agree on 2 to 3 KPIs that could directly measure progress. So for example, if your goal is to increase ARR, then the KPI is going to be net new ARR per quarter. You see? And then if the goal is reduce sales cycle, then the KPI is going to be average time from MQL to closed won. And then we move from strategic goals identification in our KPI alignment workshop. We moved from strategic goals identification to metric selection to metric ownership. And then after we do our metric ownership aspect of the workshop, where we kind of assign a steward for each KPI, right? We know what the goal is, we know what the KPI for the goal is, and now that needs a steward, it needs an owner, right? Like for example, okay, the RevOps analyst is going to own lead conversion rate, and the sales ops owns the average deal size, right? That kind of thing. So we do that workshop, and then we move on to a dashboard audit. And in our dashboard audit, we do a dashboard inventory. So we list all the dashboards used by marketing, by sales, by customer success, and we note which tool they reside within. So what are you reporting in? We've got these 10 reports in HubSpot. We've got these 3 in Tableau. We've got these 5 in Looker. And then we look for definitional consistency. So for each dashboard tile or report, we confirm that metric definitions are consistent. So for example, does opportunity mean the same thing in the filter logic across marketing and sales dashboard, right? Does it? And we actually validate that. And then in our dashboard audit, finally, we move on to update cadence. So we verify that each dashboard is actually refreshed at an appropriate frequency. So is it real time? Is it daily? Is it weekly? That kind of thing. And then in our tracking and metrics audit, we moved on to data source validation. So we look for, first of all, in data source validation, a primary source determination. So for each KPI, we will identify a single source of truth, which is, net new ARR is calculated in the data warehouse, not in the CRM, right? So we need to know if we have a KPI and we have a numerical value that needs to be achieved, then we want to know from where will we retrieve that numerical value? What is the source of truth for the numbers in that determine whether we're winning or losing according to that KPI? And then we do cross-source reconciliation. So we spot check key metrics across multiple tools. So for example, we'll compare closed won count in HubSpot versus financial data in the ERP. And very often you are forced to do these kinds of things in a reconciliatory way when finance checks sales ops numbers, right? That kind of thing. Like teams kind of check each other, but from a RevOps perspective, you want to minimize the need for that kind of checking. And then finally, in our data source validation, we'll look at lagging versus leading indicators. So we ensure that dashboards include both leading indicators like MQL volume, SQL velocity, things like that, as well as lagging indicators like closed won, revenue, churn rate, indicators, like things like that. And then finally, in our tracking and metrics audit, we will do a reportance, cadence, and distribution audit, which is we look at meeting agenda integration. So we confirm that key reports are part of daily stand-ups. So weekly RevOps reviews and monthly executive dashboards are part of the cadence of the company's self-awareness. And then we'll also look at a stakeholder list. So we'll document who receives which reports. Our sales managers, they get weekly pipeline reports. CEO gets monthly ARR training, and we might even create a pipeline, visual pipeline to show that. So what are the deliverables of the tracking and metrics aspect of the depth audit, DEPT? What do we produce at T? Well, the first thing we produce is a KPI alignment matrix, linking strategic goals to metrics, definitions, data sources, owners. So that KPI alignment matrix. The second thing that we'll generate as a deliverable is a dashboard review, which logs capturing inconsistencies, outdated data sources, or missing visualizations, right? You guys need to be looking at this. This needs to exist and it doesn't. And then finally, we will create a schedule of report distribution. So this is when these people receive this information, including the recipients, the frequency, and the meeting contexts in which the cadences occur for those RevOps reviews. And finally, in our depth audit, we get to H, DEPTH, right? So we've got data, execution, platform, tracking, and then finally H, human alignment. So again, what's the rationale for auditing human alignment? And we've already touched on this a bit, but technology and processes can only achieve their intended effect if people are actually aligned around shared objectives, these clear goals, and open communication, right? Misaligned incentives, siloed teams, unaddressed conflicts, these will all undermine the most robust RevOps infrastructure. The human alignment audit is often the most uncomfortable, but seeks to measure real, genuine organizational buy-in by behavior. We measure by behavior and we clarify responsibilities and we surface areas of friction. And this is often the most rewarding aspect of an audit because this is often the most neglected aspect of the company's RevOps practice. So what are our key audit activities within our human alignment audit? First thing we do is we conduct stakeholder interviews and surveys. So we'll have role-based interviews. We'll conduct structured interviews with sample representatives from sales, from marketing, from customer success, and from finance. We'll focus on, first of all, what's your understanding of the RevOps goals? What are your perceived bottlenecks in current operations? What are pain points related to data accuracy and handoffs and reporting? And then on top of role-based interviews, we will also conduct an anonymous survey. So we will distribute a short survey, 5 to 10 questions to all revenue adjacent employees. And we're going to be measuring alignments on the clarity of your own role in the revenue funnel, confidence in data accuracy, satisfaction with current reporting and dashboards, frequency and quality of cross-departmental communication, right? So we conduct initially those stakeholder interviews and surveys. Next thing we do in our human alignment audit from after interviews and surveys is we move on to the RACI model assessment, which is this RACI model assessment. It's a role and responsibility matrix. We build a RACI chart that lists each major RevOps task, like lead scoring rule updating, an ARR forecast poll, deal desk approval, and we assign RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So responsible means we look for the owner of the execution. Accountable means who's the final decision maker. Consulted means who are the advisors whose input is required. And informed means who are the stakeholders who must be notified. And then we do a gap analysis, not a GAAP, but a GAP analysis, which we identify tasks with either missing assignments, so nobody's assigned, or overlapping assignments, multiple stakeholders labeled A or R, right? Oh, you're responsible and accountable, right? And we do that analysis of either something, there's a gap there, or certain roles overloaded. And then we conduct communication cadence and forums. So we perform a meeting audit, which is that we list recurring cross-functional meetings like a weekly RevOps sync or a monthly sales marketing review or a quarterly executive business review. And for each of these meetings, we will document the attendees, the agenda topics, and the outcomes, and we'll evaluate whether meeting frequency and attendee roles actually align with organizational needs. And then we will review the escalation mechanism relevant to those meetings. So we'll confirm the existence of an escalation path when urgent bottlenecks arise. So, for example, there's a breach of there's a growth of SLA breaches or data outages, and we'll determine if stakeholders know whom to contact and how quickly. And then the fourth part of our human alignment assessment, right? We get our stakeholder interviews and surveys. We'll conduct our RACI model assessment where we review who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed. Then we'll move on to a communication cadence audit, and then we'll move from there onto an incentive and compensation alignment. So first of all, we'll review commission and bonus plans. So we'll review sales compensation plans to ensure that they don't encourage behavior that actually undermines RevOps. This is very difficult to do, in fact. For example, reps ignore proper stage documentation because their commission triggers only on booked deals, right? And then marketing and customer success incentives. So we verify that marketing goals like MQL volume and customer success goals like customer retention rate don't actually conflict with sales objectives. So we identify these misalignments and we propose adjustments. And then what are the deliverables of this human alignment audit? Well, the deliverables are a completed RACI matrix with assigned roles and identifications of gaps and overlaps there. Number two is a summary of stakeholder interview findings, like highlighting recurring themes. For example, marketing felt SLAs were ambiguous, or sales VP reports inconsistency in lead quality for marketing, right? So a summary of those stakeholder interview findings, highlighting those recurring themes. And then also third, we'll produce as a deliverable a chart of meeting forums and their effectiveness. So for example, the RevOps stand-up, we would rate 4 out of 5. Monthly sales review, 3 out of 5, and our reasons why. And then we will include also our recommendations, of course, for changes to incentive structures to reinforce RevOps alignment. So we've gotten through depth. that's a comprehensive kind of 360 view of our approach to auditing a company's RevOps functions and a RevOps organization. So if a company brings us to audit their RevOps organization or audit their company from a RevOps perspective, we conduct this what we call a depth audit at RevOps HQ. So again, that's data, right? That's the most important thing. That's the most foundational thing. It's data, execution, platform tracking, and human alignment. So what does it look like now to actually integrate our depth audit findings into an action plan? So once each depth dimension has been assessed, the final step is actually to synthesize the findings into a coherent action plan. And this plan should be formatted like this. It should be formatted, the depth derived action plan should first of all have an executive summary. This is a 1-page overview of the audit's scope and the top 3 revenue bottlenecks that we uncovered. Then we will move from executive summary into key findings of each depth dimension. So data health, for example, 15% of leads lacked a valid lifecycle stage, resulting in inaccurate funnel metrics. Execution and handoffs. So for example, SQLs remain in unassigned status for an average of 48 hours beyond the 24-hour SLA. Platform and integrations. For example, integration between marketing automation and CRM fails 8% of the time, causing lead capture gaps. Move on to tracking and metrics. For example, KPI definitions for opportunity amount differ between finance and sales ops by 8%. And then finally, of course, human alignment, which is, for example, customer success and sales share no formal handoff metric, leading to duplicated outreach effort. So then after in our final report, in our depth report, we move on from executive summary to key findings by depth dimension to priority actions and owners. So for each finding, we assign a priority level, high, medium, or low, and an owner, RevOps analyst, sales ops lead, marketing manager, and a target completion date. So for example, a high priority is clean duplicate leads in the CRM. The owner is the RevOps analyst, and it's due in 30 days. Medium priority, update MQL to SQL criteria documentation. The owner's marketing ops, it's due in 45 days. Low priority, consolidate 2 overlapping marketing tools. Owner is finance, review budget, due 90 days. And then finally, in our report, we'll move to metrics for success, which is where we will articulate how each corrective action will be measured. So for example, reduce duplicate leads to less than 2% of total, right? And that is measured by a weekly system audit. And then also we could, for example, have achieve 90% adherence to 24-hour SQL follow-up SLA. And that's tracked via our sales ops report in a dashboard, right? And then we have we review and we have a review and continuous improvement cadence suggestion. So we specified that a depth audit will be rerun in your organization on a quarterly or biannual basis, and we do recommend that companies conduct a RevOps audit on their company on a quarterly basis as a best practice for revenue hygiene. And then we define the meeting forum. So what is that? A quarterly RevOps business review that we'll conduct, where we have an updated depth audit where results will be presented, and we will regenerate these deliverables from our system, and you will be able to see from a high-level view where your company is performing well, where it's not, and you'll have a list of action steps that you can take to remediate any deficiencies in your RevOps processes or systems. So that was a lot. Conducting a RevOps audit through the depth model, the data execution platforms, tracking, and human alignment. This ensures a holistic assessment of an organization's revenue function. Each dimension addresses a critical facet of revenue health. The accurate data enables reliable insights. Clearly defined processes guarantee smooth handoffs. Well-configured platforms ensure uninterrupted data flow. Robust tracking yields actionable metrics. And then finally, aligned teams sustain continuous improvement. By systematically applying depth, RevOps leaders can uncover hidden revenue leaks that are caused by data gaps or process inefficiencies. By using a depth audit, you can optimize your technology stack by identifying integration failures or redundant tools. You can, and this is huge for us, standardize the KPIs and the dashboards to measure the true impact of RevOps initiatives, and then foster cross-functional alignment through clear goals. That sounds very buzzy, but foster that cross-functional alignment through clear roles, consistent communication, and incentive structures that actually reinforce cooperation between the teams. And ultimately, a depth audit really lays the groundwork for predictable, scalable growth. Establishing that recurring audit cadence, ideally every quarter, allows organizations to detect these new bottlenecks as they arise and to adapt to evolving market conditions. As revenue operations mature, depth becomes not merely a one-time diagnostic, but a guiding framework, really the heartbeat of your revenue organization that drives ongoing optimization and alignment and accountability across the entire revenue engine.